Shanti stumbled backward from her chair. Ethan, what is all this? His jaw tightened. I was going to explain, but not like this. Explain what? She choked. That woman, he said. The one in the video. Shanti, she came to our door. She needed help. I tried to. But before he finished, a loud banging slammed against the front door. Both of them whipped their heads toward the sound. 3 pounding hits. Then a voice. Police. Open the door. Shanti's heart nearly stopped. Ethan's face went white. And in that moment, she knew. Whatever was happening was worse than she had imagined. Much worse. And it was only going to get worse from here. The chapter ends with the police forcing entry into the house. And Ethan grabbing Shanti's wrist, whispering, "Don't tell them anything. You don't know the truth yet." The sound of fists pounding on the front door echoed through the house like thunder rolling across a dark sky. Shanti's heart leapt into her throat so fast she thought she might choke on it. Ethan's hand tightened around her wrist. Not enough to hurt her, but enough to say don't move. The police hit the door again, 3 heavy strikes that shook the walls. Open up. Police department. Shanti stared at Ethan, her eyes wide, her breathing sharp and shaky. She didn't understand what was happening. She didn't know why the police were here. She didn't know why Ethan was so calm, or why his calmness terrified her even more. Ethan, she whispered. Why are they here? What did you do? He swallowed hard. His eyes darted toward the hallway, calculating something she couldn't see. Shanti, he said quietly, you have to trust me. I can't trust anything right now, she whispered back. The pounding on the door came again. Harder this time. Mr. Cooper. We know you're inside. Open the door now. Shanti felt faint. She grabbed the edge of Ethan's desk to steady herself. Her mind flashed with images, the bookshelf falling, the smear on the floor, the missing woman on the computer screen, the videos, Ethan standing behind her in the office like a shadow waiting to swallow her whole. She didn't know what the truth was anymore. But she knew one thing. Something was terribly wrong. Ethan squeezed her wrist again. Don't say anything, okay? No matter what they ask. The way he said it made her stomach twist. It wasn't just a warning. It was almost a plea. A desperate plea. Another crash at the door. Then, crack. The wooden frame splintered. Voices shouted. Boots stomped. The door busted open. Shanti's breath caught. 4 officers stormed into the house, weapons drawn, flashlights cutting through the dim hallway like white swords of light. Hands where we can see them, one officer yelled. Step forward slowly, another shouted. Ethan lifted his hands immediately, his face blank and unnervingly calm. I'm not resisting. Shanti's whole body trembled. She raised her hands too, even though nobody had aimed at her yet. Tears burned the corners of her eyes. She didn't want to cry, but fear pushed the tears like someone forcing open a locked door. The officers moved fast, 2 of them gripping Ethan, slamming him against the wall, cuffing his wrists behind his back. One officer stayed laser-focused on Shanti, telling her in a controlled voice, Stay right where you are. She nodded quickly, her voice caught somewhere deep in her chest, unable to escape. Her legs shook so badly she wasn't sure she could stay standing. What's going on? She managed to whisper, her voice thin and cracking. Why are you doing this? One of the officers, the one who looked older than the rest, approached her with his palms raised gently. We're not here to hurt you. We just need to make sure you're safe. Safe. The word felt strange. Wrong. Like it didn't belong in this house anymore. Behind her, Ethan was pulled toward the front hallway. He looked over his shoulder and met her eyes. And what she saw in them was not fear. It was sadness. Deep, heavy sadness. Shanti, he said softly, don't let them twist the truth. Sir, that's enough, the officer holding him snapped. They dragged him toward the door. Shanti took 1 step forward. Wait, please. What is he being arrested for? One officer paused just long enough to answer. Suspicion of involvement in a missing persons case. Shanti's knees buckled. Her hand covered her mouth. Her voice broke into a whisper. No, that can't be right. Ethan lowered his head. He didn't shout. He didn't argue. He didn't deny it. He just whispered one last time. It's not what you think. Then they pulled him outside into the fading daylight. And the house fell quiet. The wrong kind of quiet. The kind that wraps around you like a cold blanket. Shanti stood frozen in the living room, Her eyes locked on the doorway where Ethan had just disappeared. Her mind spun like a storm, pulling everything into its center. Questions, fears, memories, all of it swirling so fast she could barely breathe. The older officer stepped closer. Are you injured in any way? She shook her head numbly. Did your husband hurt you? Again she shook her head. No. Ethan would never. But then her voice cracked. Because she wasn't sure of anything anymore. Not after the last 24 hours. Not after what she found in his office. The officer exchanged a quiet look with another officer, then said gently, "We're going to need to search the house. Standard procedure." She nodded weakly and stepped aside. The officers spread out. One went to Ethan's office. Another to the kitchen. Another toward the bedrooms. Shanti stood stiffly in the hallway, hugging herself as if she were trying to hold her body together. She watched the officer enter the office she had been afraid to enter herself only an hour ago. She wanted to run in and stop him. She wanted to scream. She wanted to pretend none of this was real. But she didn't move. She couldn't. Her mind replayed the moment she clicked on the video. The missing woman walking down their street. The way Ethan appeared behind her in the doorway right after. Don't tell them anything. You don't know the truth yet. Why did he say that? What truth? What was he so desperate to hide? The officer inside the office called out, "Detective! You'll want to see this." A detective. There was a detective here? Shanti turned around and saw the older officer walking toward the office. Maybe he wasn't just an officer. Maybe he was the detective in charge of the case. Her heart pounded. She should go in there. She should hear what they found. She should stand up for Ethan, or be ready to hear the worst. But her feet felt glued to the floor. She heard murmurs of voices from inside the office. She heard drawers opening, papers rustling, a chair sliding. And then, Jesus, look at all this. Her stomach dropped. She took a shaky breath, forced her legs to move, and walked slowly toward the office. Her heart hammered louder with every step. She reached the doorway, gripping the frame to steady herself. The detective turned when he saw her. His expression softened slightly. "Mrs. Cooper, you shouldn't be in here right now." What did you find?" she whispered. He hesitated. And that hesitation scared her more than anything else. "Mrs. Cooper," he said carefully, "can I ask you something?" She nodded, throat tight. "Were you aware that your husband had been communicating with several of the missing women before they disappeared?" The room spun. She grabbed the door frame tighter. "No," she whispered. "That's impossible. Ethan barely talks to strangers. He hardly even uses social media." The detective nodded slowly. "I understand this is hard to believe. But we found messages. Emails. Some dated as recently as last week." Shanti pressed her hand to her forehead, dizzy. I can't. I don't know anything about that. I swear, I didn't know." Her voice cracked at the end, and tears spilled down her face. The detective looked at Ethan's computer screen, the one still showing the missing woman, and shook his head. "There's something else," he said quietly. Shanti looked up, her eyes red and terrified. "What else?" He motioned to one of the officers, who handed him a sealed evidence bag. Inside it was a necklace. A simple silver chain, with a tiny heart-shaped charm. Shanti stared at it, confused. "Whose is that?" The detective held it up gently. "It belongs to one of the missing women." Her blood turned to ice. "And we found it," the detective continued, "in a drawer in your husband's desk." Shanti stumbled backward. No, that can't be right. Ethan wouldn't take something from someone. He wouldn't. Her voice shattered again. Her legs gave out. She sank to the floor, shaking violently as tears poured down her cheeks. The detective knelt beside her, speaking softly. "Mrs. Cooper, do you know why your husband would have something like this?" "No," she whispered through trembling breaths. "I don't know anything anymore." Her entire world was breaking in slow motion. Everything she thought she knew about her husband, everything she believed about love and trust and safety, was dissolving right in front of her. The detective stood and looked around the room. "We're not done searching. There could be more. More evidence. More secrets. More things she didn't want to know." The officers kept examining the room, their whispered conversations echoing in her ears like ghostly voices. She felt small. Lost. Like a child trapped inside a nightmare with no way out. But then, Another officer shouted from down the hall. "Detective! We've got something." The detective rushed out. Shanti forced herself to stand and follow, her heart pounding so loudly she couldn't hear her own footsteps. The officer was kneeling near an air vent in the hallway floor. He held something in his gloved hand. Something dark. Something small. Something wrapped in cloth. The detective crouched beside him. "What is it?" The officer slowly unfolded the cloth. And when he did, Shanti's breath left her body. Inside the cloth was a bloody glove. The detective stared at it, his expression tightening. "Bag it. Now." Shanti backed away, shaking violently. "No, no, where did you find that?" The officer answered without looking at her. "Inside the vent. It was pushed deep inside." Shanti shook her head over and over. "No, that's not. Ethan wouldn't, he." The detective finally turned to her. "Mrs. Cooper," he said softly, "this changes everything." Tears blurred her vision. She felt her soul screaming. "What does that mean?" she whispered, barely able to get the words out. The detective hesitated. Then he said the words that shattered whatever was left of her world. "It means your husband might not only be connected to the missing women." He paused. Then added, "He may be responsible for what happened to them." Shanti's knees buckled again. Her hands flew to her mouth. A small, broken sound escaped her throat. "No, please, no." The detective held up his hand. "We haven't confirmed anything yet. But this is serious." Shanti's mind spiraled. She remembered Ethan's voice. "You don't know the truth yet." What truth? What was he hiding? What was he trying to protect her from? Or was he protecting himself? Before she could process any of it, a scream ripped through the house. Not hers. A scream from one of the officers. Everyone froze. Then the officer shouted again from the basement stairs. "Detective! You need to see this. Now!" Shanti's blood turned to ice. The detective ran. The officers ran. And Shanti, shaking uncontrollably, followed behind them. As they rushed down into the basement, where something even more horrifying waited in the darkness. The basement door groaned open as the detective rushed down the stairs, his flashlight slicing through the heavy darkness. The light beam wobbled slightly, just enough for Shanti to realize the detective was nervous. Detectives didn't get nervous. Not the ones she'd seen on TV. They were always calm, always in control. But this one, he moved like he was walking into something he didn't want to see. Shanti followed slowly behind the group of officers, gripping the handrail so tightly her knuckles turned white. Her legs trembled with every step, as if the basement was pulling her downward against her will. She wasn't sure she wanted to go down there. She wasn't sure she was ready to see whatever made that officer scream. But she also knew she had no choice. This was her home, her life, her marriage, her truth. And she had to face it, no matter how terrifying it felt. The basement smelled like dust and cold concrete. The kind of smell that sank into your skin and made everything feel older and sadder than it really was. A single old bulb hung from the ceiling, but it didn't work. It just dangled there like a broken eye staring down at everything. The officer who had screamed was standing near the back wall of the basement, his chest rising and falling fast. His face looked pale under the harsh flashlight beams. "Detective," he said, pointing at something on the wall. You should see this." The detective stepped closer. Shanti's heart pounded. Her breathing turned thin and shaky. She moved through the shadows, pushing past her fear little by little until she stood close enough to see what the officer was pointing at. At first she didn't understand what she was looking at. It was a wall. Just an ordinary basement wall. Grey concrete. Cracks running through it. Dust clinging to the rough surface. But then her eyes adjusted, and she saw something that made her stomach twist so hard she nearly doubled over. There were photographs. Dozens of them. Maybe more. Pinned, taped, or nailed directly into the concrete. They formed a messy collage, a patchwork of faces, bodies, places, letters, symbols, and dates. The pictures were of women. Different women. All kinds of women. Some looked happy. Some looked nervous. Some looked lost. And Shanti recognized at least 3 of the faces. The missing women from the news. The ones Ethan had been searching for online. Her blood froze. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "No, no, no." The detective moved his flashlight slowly across the wall. This is not good." One of the officers snapped photos of the wall for evidence. Another pulled out gloves and began removing one of the pictures carefully. Shanti stepped closer, even though every part of her body told her to step back, to run away, to pretend none of this was real. The pictures weren't the only thing on the wall. There were also notes. Handwritten notes. Some messy, some neat. Some torn. Some smudged. One note near the top read, "I didn't mean to." Another one said, "I had no choice." Another, "They shouldn't have followed me." Shanti felt sick. Her eyes filled with tears. She pressed her fist against her mouth to keep herself from crying out loud. Her mind fought against itself, half wanting to believe Ethan was innocent, half unable to deny what was right in front of her. The detective pointed at the wall. "Mrs. Cooper, do you know anything about this?" "No," she said, wiping tears from her cheeks. "I've never been in this basement. Ethan always said it was old and full of spiders. He said he'd clean it one day, but he never did. I swear, I didn't know this was here." The detective studied her face, then nodded. "I believe you." Her knees wobbled with relief, not because the detective believed her, but because she didn't feel crazy for saying it. But then, the flashlight beam moved toward the far left corner of the wall. And there, in the middle of all the photos, was a picture of her, Shanti, taken from behind. She recognized her own jacket, her own hair, her own walk. A photo of her outside the grocery store. She remembered the day. She had been heading home after buying fruit and cereal. Ethan had been at work. She had thought she was alone. She stared at the photo, her lips parting slowly. Why would Ethan take a picture of me like this?" she whispered. The detective didn't answer right away. He stepped closer to the wall, studying the photos around hers. There were arrows drawn in black marker, circles around some faces, notes scribbled in the margins. He took a deep breath. "Mrs. Cooper," he said quietly, "I need you to prepare yourself. There's something else here." Her heart skipped. What do you mean?" He didn't explain. Instead, he motioned for an officer to bring over a long wooden box sitting under a work table. An officer carried it into the center of the basement and set it on the dusty floor. The detective knelt beside it and slowly opened the lid. Inside were notebooks, stacked neatly, organized carefully, like someone had spent years writing in them. The detective opened the first one. There were dates on every page. Pages filled with writing. Pages filled with names. Pages filled with details about women. Where they lived. Where they worked. When they disappeared. And in some cases, where their bodies were found. Shanti gasped and stumbled back, hitting the wall behind her. Her whole body shook violently as she stared at the notebooks. "No, please, no," she choked out. "Ethan wouldn't do this. He wouldn't hurt anyone. He wouldn't." Her voice broke again. The detective didn't argue. He didn't confirm anything. He didn't say Ethan was guilty. He simply said, "These journals need to be examined. Until then, we won't know for sure." Shanti squeezed her eyes shut. "I don't understand. Why would he have these? What does any of this mean?" The detective closed the notebook. Sometimes people hide sides of themselves even from the people they love. Shanti felt those words hit her like a hammer. Her legs shook. Her arms felt weak. Her head spun painfully. All she could think about was the way Ethan held her hand when they watched movies. The way he kissed her forehead when she was sad. The way he made her laugh even on her worst days. The way he told her she was safe with him. Safe. Was that ever true? Before she could say anything else, one of the officers near the stairs called down. "Detective. We found something else upstairs. Something big." The detective straightened immediately. "What is it?" he shouted back. The officer hesitated. "It's in the backyard," he said. You really need to see this." Shanti's breath caught in her throat. The detective didn't waste a second. He grabbed his flashlight and started up the stairs. The officers followed him. Shanti wiped her tears with her sleeve and forced herself to climb the stairs too. When they reached the backyard door, 2 officers were already outside. They stood near a patch of dirt by the fence, their faces stiff and serious. "What did you find?" the detective asked. One officer pointed at the ground. "We noticed the dirt was disturbed. Freshly turned." The detective frowned. "And?" The officer swallowed. "We started digging a little." Shanti's heart dropped like a stone. "And we found this." He lifted an evidence bag. Inside it was a woman's shoe. Dirty, worn, and splattered with something dark. Shanti's breath hitched. Oh God, please no. The detective walked closer. Whose is it? We don't know yet, the officer said. But there's more down there. Something else is buried. Shanti covered her mouth with her hand. Panic shot through her veins like lightning. She stepped back, shaking her head. No. Stop. Stop digging. Please. This must be a mistake. Someone else could have done this. The officer gave her a sad, sympathetic look. No one else had access to this yard. Tears poured down Shanti's face again. She felt like her whole world was collapsing into the dirt beneath her feet. The detective turned to the officer. Keep digging. Carefully. They dug deeper. Shanti watched every scoop of dirt fall away. She felt each shovel hit her heart. The world felt slow, heavy, unsteady. Then, the shovel hit something hard. A dull, hollow thud. The officer froze. The detective knelt beside the hole and brushed away the remaining dirt with his gloved hands. Something pale was sticking out of the ground. A shape. A curve. A bone. Shanti's scream ripped through the air. Raw, loud, and heartbreaking. The detective stood, his face grim. Stop. Don't uncover anything else. Mark this area. We need a forensics team. Shanti stumbled backward, shaking violently. Her vision blurred. Her chest hurt so badly she thought she might faint. No, no. Ethan, why? Why? Her voice echoed across the yard. But no one answered. One officer approached her gently. Mrs. Cooper, you need to sit down. She let him guide her to the patio chair, but her mind drifted far away from her body. She felt numb. Empty. Lost. The detective turned to her. Mrs. Cooper, I know this is overwhelming. But we can't jump to conclusions yet. But you think he did it, she whispered. The detective didn't say yes. He didn't have to. His silence said everything. Shanti buried her face in her hands and sobbed. She didn't care who saw. Her world was breaking, and she couldn't stop it. Couldn't slow it down. Couldn't make sense of it. All she could think of was the man she married. The man she loved. The man she trusted. Was any of it real? A loud voice cut through her thoughts. Detective! Someone shouted from the side gate. Everyone turned. An officer ran toward them, out of breath, pale, panicked. We just got word from the station, he gasped. The detective stiffened. What happened? The officer swallowed hard, then said. Ethan Cooper, escaped custody. Shanti froze. The world stopped. What? The detective snapped. How? He overpowered an officer in the hallway. He's gone. He's on foot. Units are searching the area. Shanti's heart dropped into her stomach. The detective grabbed his radio and barked orders. Officers scattered in every direction. Shanti sat frozen, her eyes wide with terror. Because she suddenly realized something. Ethan wasn't just missing from police custody. He knew the house. He knew the holes in the fences. He knew the woods behind the yard. He knew every hiding spot within miles. And worst of all, he knew she was home. Alone. She looked at the detective, her voice trembling like a breaking branch. Detective, if he escaped. She swallowed hard. Is he coming for me? The detective didn't answer. He didn't need to. The look in his eyes told her everything she feared. Yes. And he might already be closer than she realized. The moment the truth came out, the entire Cooper house felt different, like the walls themselves were listening, waiting for what would happen next. Detective Harris stood in front of David Cooper, holding the one piece of evidence that destroyed every lie he had tried so hard to protect. It was a plain gray USB drive. Nothing special to look at. But what lived inside it? That was the part no one was ready for. When Harris plugged it into the laptop, the screen lit up with dozens of video files dated over 6 months. Each one was labeled with short notes. Session 1. Her crying again. I think she knows. Must act soon. David sat completely still. His hands were shaking, but he tried to hide it by pressing them between his knees. The first video opened automatically. At first, it looked like a normal home video. Shanti Cooper standing in their living room, hands folded, eyes tired. She looked scared. But even worse, she looked used to being scared. And then David entered the frame. Not yelling. Not hitting her. No, he was calm. Too calm. He spoke to her the way someone talks to a broken clock. Slow. Cold. Detached. Shanti, stop saying you're leaving, David said in the video. You know what happens if you walk out that door. Shanti flinched, not because he moved toward her, but because she believed him. Detective Harris paused the video. David, do you want to tell us what she was afraid of? David kept staring at the table. That's when Harris hit play again. This time, David's voice was even colder. You promised me you'd stay. We had a deal. I fixed your mess, now you fix mine. The camera shook a little, like Shanti was trembling while recording. And just when the video looked like it was about to get worse, the screen cut to black. Everyone in the room let out a breath they didn't know they were holding. But Detective Harris wasn't finished. He clicked the next video. This one was dated just 2 days before Shanti died. The footage showed Shanti packing a small suitcase. Clothes, documents, even an envelope filled with cash. She looked determined. Terrified, but determined. She whispered toward the camera, "If something happens to me, it wasn't an accident. Please. Someone tell the truth." David slammed his hand on the table. That's enough. But Detective Harris didn't stop the video. Because the ending was the most important part. Shanti froze when she heard footsteps behind her. She whispered, "His home." And the screen turned black again. The room stayed silent for a long time. Too long. Finally, Detective Harris leaned forward. "David. Shanti tried to leave. And she was afraid of you. It's all here. This tells a very different story from what you told us." David rubbed his forehead, breathing hard. "I didn't kill her. I didn't." But Harris cut him off. "We found your fingerprints on the railing outside the second-floor balcony. Fresh ones. Matching the time of death." That was the final hit. David's eyes filled with something dark, anger, fear, guilt, or all of it mixed together. His whole body seemed to shrink. "It wasn't supposed to happen," he whispered. "She wasn't supposed to fall." The room froze. Detective Harris slowly pulled out a chair. "Tell us exactly what happened." David squeezed his hands together so hard his knuckles turned white. "She said she was leaving," he whispered. "And I panicked." He looked away, ashamed. "I grabbed her arm to stop her. She pulled away. I grabbed harder. She screamed. She said she hated me. She said she wished she never married me." He swallowed hard. "I pushed her away so she'd stop yelling. I didn't mean to push her that hard." She stumbled back. The door to the balcony was open. Detective Harris's voice was quiet. "And she fell." David nodded. "I watched her go over the railing. I didn't even move. I just stood there." He covered his face with both hands. "It was my fault. I didn't want to face it. So I made up the story about the fall being an accident." The confession filled the room with a heavy sadness. Even though David had done something terrible, hearing him break apart made it clear he wasn't a monster born. He was a good man who let fear, anger, and pain twist him into someone unrecognizable. Detective Harris stood up. "David Cooper, you're under arrest for the murder of your wife, Shanti Cooper." David didn't fight. Didn't argue. He just looked empty. As the officers cuffed him and walked him outside, neighbors gathered around. Some whispered, some cried, some shook their heads in disbelief. But all of them watched. And all of them understood. Sometimes the scariest monsters are the ones who look ordinary. Sometimes the darkest secrets hide behind the cleanest doors. And sometimes, love doesn't save a person. It destroys them. The police later discovered that Shanti had been hiding years of emotional pain, fear, and secret suffering she tried to keep from the world. Her death became a message to the whole community. Be kind. Be patient. And always check on the people who smile the most. Because sometimes, they're the ones hurting the deepest. The Shanti Cooper case would go on to become one of the most shocking tragedies the town had ever seen. And a reminder that behind every closed door, a completely different story might be unfolding. If you want more true crime style stories like this, subscribe, like the video, and turn on notifications, so you never miss the next shocking case we uncover. Your support helps us keep telling stories that matter. Stay safe. Stay aware. And remember, real danger often hides in plain sight.